Well, thank you very much, Mona, for inviting me. This is really great for me. I just arrived to the area, first time in Texas ever. Arrived like 2-3 months ago, something like that. So I'm pretty new and I'm very excited to be giving a talk for the first time to the Metroplex audience, let's say. Recently coming from upstate New York, teaching at RPI, recently at Polytechnic Institute. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to present my work somehow chronologically, and I decided to start with this work that is somehow different from the other works that you're going to see, but for some reason, to my understanding, it's a very comprehensive work to some extent. So this is a performance, it's a work in progress that I started like in 2009, a few months after I arrived to the United States for the first time to live here. And it started pretty much as more as a cathartic thing where I needed to express this frustration that I have about speaking English, and I have to embody this language in a way, which it's pretty much inspired by moments like this, where I have to speak in a language that is not mine, and it will be so much easier if I speak in my native language. So I started doing this action that is an everyday action where I cut a portion of my Spanish-English dictionary, and I cut the English portion and I eat it. And it sort of started as this. Again, it was a very cathartic thing, and I was trying to echo this idea from the Manifesto of Anthropophagia from Oswald de Andrade, the Brazilian writer, that in 1928 he said, like, well, the best way to process an uneven culture is to swallow it, to eat it. Brazilians were doing this with Spanish people that were getting there, right? They were eating them. And so this anthropophagia sort of I was thinking that it was a very South American thing to do. And so at first it started at that, but then I realized that to me it was not that just this absurd and fast action. It was pretty much something that was happening in all my work. And it's this idea of embodiment. And the idea of, for me, embodiment, this artificial thing that was going on with me. And also looking at language as a technology, as Derrida will say. And thinking that the dictionary, again, was a technology. And so, because my work, and you will see this later, it's about technology, and I'm dealing about the issues that I talk about. There's pretty much technological issues or technocultural issues, and that's why I use technology. But in this work, I don't use any technology except the camera to record the actions. So this is just 49 days, as you will see, of the action. That I don't know when I'm going to finish it. Very honestly, since I got to Texas, arrived to Texas, I'll slow down the practice for, I don't know if it's Texas feels a little bit more like South American or something, but it happened. But it's still in the process. So this is just like a little bit of an introduction of my work, and then I decided to really start my talk with this preface or a prologue that I'm going to read to you because I believe that this quote that I got from Carrie Wolf in one of his last books, What is Posthumanism, is in a way an overreaching statement of what I believe is my work about. Like when I wrote it, I was like, oh, come on, this could be my artist statement, and that's it. So I decided to start with this as a preface. So he says, the question of posthumanism enables us to describe the human and its characteristics, modes of communication, interaction, meaning, social significations, and affective investments with greater specificity once we have removed meaning from the ontologically closed domain of consciousness, reason, reflection, and so on. It forces us to rethink our taken for granted mode of human experience by recontextualizing them in terms of the entire sensorium of other living beings and their own autopoietic ways of bringing forth the world. ways that are, since we ourselves are human animals, part of the evolutionary history and behavioral and psychological repertoire of the human itself. But also insist that we attend to the specificity of the human, its ways of being in the world, its way of knowing, observing, and describing, by acknowledging that it is fundamentally a prosthetic creature that has co-evolved with various forms of technicity and materiality, forms that are radically not human and yet have nevertheless made the human what it is. So that's just a starting point. I think it's pretty much what I'll try to address during this talk. At the very beginning, I'm just gonna sort of like try to do some sort of like chronological thing, although I always think it's not the best way to do it, but it helped me to organize the talk. So I'm just gonna start from the very beginning because I think it will help us understand my current research, my current practice. My background, it's not in the arts. So as Mona said, I studied communication. So my background was pretty much in semiotics and some feminist theories and gender theories and stuff like that. And art really came towards the end. Some sort of like a way for me to getting away from media studies, which, I mean, I was studying journalism and broadcasting and stuff like that. And I realized it was not what I thought when I was younger. And so instead of quitting, I started to use the technologies I learned for like broadcasting, video, documentary, and that stuff, to do something that I didn't know was art, but eventually it became my artwork. So at this moment, I did this, well, it was a theoretical, like it was an academic, more formal thing, so I didn't have space to make work. But I started doing this work that, in order to justify my work during like the career, I needed to like make a whole thesis about like, okay, this is my research. It's gonna be about women, technologies, and self-representations, how women self-represent their bodies with technologies. So that was like my main thesis back then. And so I did, this was my first work. And it was called Trans Body. And it was a interactive video installation. And pretty much my interest at this time was like, okay, how technology performs in the body and how technology can change the way we understand gender, let's say. And this is far away, and my practice, it's not like this now, but still there's some things that this kind of work trigger my research. So in this work particularly, what I was doing, I put an open call all over the place, and I asked people to record their bodies using their camera attached to their belly and record half of the body up or half of the body down. And so I collect them all online, all the videos, and then when I got them there, I like created a little software that allowed me to put them all together randomly and create these trans bodies during the installation. So the installation were these sort of kind of like human-sized bodies, trans bodies that were built together with bodies that are received from people that I don't know. And it was like, well, instead of talking again about telepresence and teletechnologies, that how these technologies are like, well, through internet, how these were really the technologies that were allowing to create some noise in the normal dichotomy in genders, let's say. A lot echoing a lot of theories from post-feminism, Joanna Haraway, and blah, blah, blah. And so right after that, again, talking about how technology performs in the body and how I can see my identity or human identity after, and how we interact with technology, this piece, which is called Homage to the Two Fridas, which is a very simple performance where I just sit next to the computer, and what I do is like I take my heartbeats and I reproduce my heartbeats in this heart that I have that I hold in my hand. So it's a cow heart that not here, but in Argentina you can get in a grocery store. to eat. So I intervene and I put like speakers in it and I amplify my heartbeat. So in the original piece, Frida, what she's doing is she's sitting in a bench with her other Frida. This Frida, there was the Tehuana Frida, right? The traditional, the Mexican Frida, and the other one was like the colonial Frida. And she's speaking about her two identities in a way. So I decided to sort of make an homage to that piece and at the same time talk about identity, and instead of sitting with my other me, I sit next to the computer and sort of create this ambiguity between, well, who is producing the heartbeat? It's like it's coming from me, but it's the computer who's amplifying the sounds. So this is like very at the beginning, and at this point, I guess I realized I was like kind of becoming an artist or something. So because I didn't have a formal education in art, I didn't even want to say that I was an artist or anything. So what I did is the Argentine government funded me for like spend a year at home, like sort of researching in art. I asked for this grant, they gave me this grant. So it was not a formal education, I just sit down at home and study. And so I did this for a year, and I think my current research came from that moment when I started to ask, okay, what if instead of like asking how technology performs in the human natural body, I create a completely artificial body? And that little trigger, that little question really triggered a different kind of research, which is my current research, which is within autonomous and intelligent robots or robotics or robotic art. And so that question put me into a different direction, which was, first of all, more theoretically, was to research within philosophy of the mind, some research within artificial intelligence, and from an artistic perspective, it also put me into making things with my hands, like working with sculpture, working with kinetics, which were things for me totally unfamiliar by the time. And so my entire practice at that moment, or at this moment, all that work was like, okay, this kind of like combination between the sculptural part and the more software programming part, and how I could combine those things. So I'm just going to present these two works, where these two works came after that research. First, alexithymia was the first work I developed, my first robotic agent, and then anima in 2009. And it really took me a long time to develop the first one. And in alexithymia, I'm just going to explain the work and then I'm going to explain my ideas behind it. Alexithymia is an autonomous robotic agent that does not really move, does not speak, it's just sitting there in the space of the gallery, and the only interaction that has is when someone approaches it and decides to touch it, it will sweat. So it's like a sweating robot. And so that really sort of changed my entire way of thinking about interactivity in a way as well. Alexithymia, the word itself is a psychoanalytical term that I took from psychoanalysis. They use this word to describe or to talk about people that cannot express their feelings and their emotion through words. And so they had to express, they express it through the body, more like psychosomatic forms or illness. So I took that word as a trigger to sort of try to, in a way, switch the way that engineers think about how to make a robot. Usually there's two things that scientists will think. One is the behavior and the other one is the personality of a robot, right? The behavior is, well, the most important thing, and that's why you're going to start with that. An autonomous robotic agent is an entity that has a functionality, and it needs to do something, has a purpose. So for me, it was very important that not only to question that, but also to start thinking about the personality first instead of the behavior. And since I came with the idea of doing an alexithymic robot, then, well, the personality, the behavior will be a behavior that is completely corporeal in a way, because it cannot express it through words. And so that was alexithymia. Right after that, I create Anima, which again has a very human corporeal behavior. It's a robot that only breathes. And it is really kind of like on the side of a gallery space, and it only has an orifice that is not facing the audience, let's say. It's just kind of hiding there. But when people approach the piece, then this robot or these creatures start to like inhale and exhale. And if you get closer and closer to that orifice, it really starts getting like out of breath or full of breath. We don't know that. What?
Heavy breathing.
Yes, heavy breathing. Yes. So really, these two works are definitely like my current research, even though they're old, but they're informing my work, even though I'm not, like sometimes I'm not working in robotic itself, but it's the way I think my practice. I usually have a very hybrid practice, which is, one, I said robotics, but at the same time performance, and at the same time sculpture and installation. And when I started to research and read about artificial intelligence and philosophy of the mind, I sort of became very aware of how I wanted to approach this as an artist. Because of course I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer. So being very aware of that, I had at the very beginning like two intuitions or how I wanted to like approach that. And the first one is like how I put it there is like a disembodied machine can never be completely intelligent, which sounds very basic and obvious, but it was definitely my trigger to do this kind of work and try to like parody or maybe question the whole notion that in order to reproduce, to create an intelligent machine, we're reproducing the human mind. This paradigm that is coming from the functionalist paradigm that understands human being as totally rational. Like we have a way of being, like our mind is rational, representational, and rule governed. Like they do understand human mind like that. So my question was like, well, I really want to question that. And it's not that I'm the only unique crazy person thinking like that. There's a lot of scientists and philosophers thinking in that way. But my intuition was like, even though that is a big question, and artificial intelligence within the functionalist paradigm has been really successful at pattern recognition or creating logical programs. But it's still the bodily side of our intelligence, which cause them a lot of problems. And like when trying in the practice to create a robot or something like that. But I was interested, even though it might seem an old paradigm, the functionalist, I believe that that paradigm is still like somehow stick in our brain, in our imaginaries of what is a robot. Even though from philosophy they're questioning all this stuff, when we see a movie, when we watch a movie, when we sort of try to imagine a robotic being, we go again and again to think in this functionalist approach, which is, okay, there is this cycle of sensing, processing, and acting. There's always these three things as we word all this. And so my question was like, what about all these other actions that we do when we have no control about it? Like sweating, like breathing. All these more behavioral, like corporeal behaviors that we really don't have any control. Some people do, maybe in Tibet, but not me. And so that was pretty much because I was like feeling that those things are still in the social imaginaries of what a robot is. And it was even, which was my very, my interest was like, well, it was even reproduced in robotic art. I still couldn't find different imaginaries within this discourse. So that was the first thing. The second one And this is more related to, well, so I should go back and say, like, in order to like question this paradigm, I sort of decided that I will have 4 premises or 4 ways of avoiding that. One will be avoid verbal language and just stick with like corporal language. And mainly because functionalists believe that we are intelligent because we have this linguistic capacity. It's our way of expressing verbally. Language is the way, it's the most representational way we can think. And so avoiding verbal language was one thing. And even if we think about the Turing test, which still is there in our imaginary, it's, I mean, it is only linguistical. It's always through language that we can define when a human is a human and when a machine is a machine. Or we cannot differentiate. That will be the Turing test. Then the second thing, it was like to avoid mobility, because from what I was understanding, scientists and engineers, when they're trying to develop or try to investigate more the corporeal part of a human or try to imitate that, well, they go for the most obvious thing, which is mobility, which clearly is a very big deal if you're trying to do that. It's not that it's a small thing, it's really complex, and that's why they're all into that. But I wanted to not get there. I didn't want to do mobility because it's, again, one of these expected things for a robot. A robot should move. A robot should speak, a robot should move. And then the other one, it was this anthropomorphic appearance that I really wanted to get away. Even though there were some things that I was interested on, like, I mean, I'm not against organic. It was not about that, but about our verticality. It was pretty much something that I was, yeah, I'm not going to do this. And then there was a fourth one, which I sort of say in a way, which was intentionality. Intentionality was for me one of those things that I really want to avoid, because that was the main thing. When you're trying to do an agent, a robotic agent, you're definitely trying to create something that has a purpose, a functionality. And not only because I wanted to question that, but also because it was related to the art. So then this is an art robot. So then what is the functionality? And then we get into another different philosophical thing that I was interested in. I was interested in not getting into like, okay, this robot, or our robot, needs to have a functionality. Why, right? So, so that also sort of relates to the second intuition, whereas the specific subject matter of creating robotic artworks is to find a balance between an AC, what I call an AC, which is artificial corporality, and an AI, which is artificial intelligence, and aesthetic of behavior. So a couple of years ago, a while ago, Simon Penny, when he was developing his Petit Mall, which is a robotic, a very like well-known robot, one of the first robotic artworks, he was writing about his work, and he developed this term that is called aesthetic of behavior, and I thought it was very smart. He said, like, people working in robotics within the art, they're working with aesthetic of behavior. And I thought it was very smart. So I decided to take that term that he used, and I said, and I started thinking that in order to get that aesthetic of behavior, we need to work as an artist, not only with artificial intelligence, but what I call artificial corporality. And artificial corporality will be, for me, the sculptural part of the work. But I didn't have that word. So it was very clear when I was working, okay, what it will be the intelligence of this creature. But then I have to say sculpture. Then I have to say, I don't know, electronics, and things like that. And I didn't relate to that. I thought it was like really not useful, because it was not just a sculpture, and it was not a kinetic sculpture because it has intelligence. So I don't know, I decided to just call it that way. So these are my artificial corporeality creatures or something like that. And so this sort of AC thing that I call is it's sort of the basis of what I develop now, of how I think working in robotic art. And to me, that responds to these three artistic strategies or ideological strategies, where a non-linguistic embodied communication, a non-anthropomorphic sensibility, and a non-teleological, non-purposive spirit of interactivity. And why I think this is very, to me, important is because I'm working within interactive art. And this is not just, I'm not using just interactivity because I just use it. I think those creatures ultimately are going to interact with the viewer. And this is the whole thing. I'm doing art, and it's to be seen for a human being. And I think that is the center of everything to me, and what I care the most. Ultimately, what I care is that moment of encounter between these creatures that I can create and this human viewer that can come to the gallery. And what could happen between these two things, these two beings that can exist in that space at that time. And I call it honestly an encounter and not just a small interaction, because they have some kind of like reality, because they behave, because they have some personalities. And so it's not just like an interactivity, it's more like an encounter because it's a being, to my understanding. This is sort of the process of development. Oh, I think I know what I want to say. So this is the process, just a couple of pictures for you to see, and how I have this very special relationship with the things where I created all myself. I do have help for some when I need to like get some engineers to explain me some specific things. But this is when I developed alexithymia, and this is when I created anima. And this is what inspired me. Like after seeing most of the things were informed that I just speak about interactivity, it really came after seeing people interact with the work. Even I have some rough ideas of what I wanted to do, but I never thought it will be like that. When I decided to spend a lot of hours in the gallery looking. Not being like, I didn't want they to know that I was the artist, but just sitting there and see how people react and how people really respond to this work. And that was really crucial to me. And that was a shifting moment when I saw all this kind of like behaviors and reactions that people can have with this creature. And then I realized, yeah, how creature-like were. And how just static things were, or they could relate to the things because they had some sort of humanness there, or animalness or something. So I think, I'm just gonna jump to this following topic, which is this other work that I do that it's more performative. It's my performative work, and this work specifically came after doing this robotic work for different reasons, because they actually inspire me in the sense that they were a lot of time part of like my frustration of working with these technologies that are like hard for me and frustrating, and they're not doing what I want them to do, and I really wanted to look like this and they don't look like that, and also from the attachment that I have with this, because it's so much time that I spend with them that it's sort of like related to that. And so I decided, there were two different pieces, Becoming a Normal and Becoming With. I create this is actually an installation made out of like 23 furry creatures that move around the space, in a very random way. They really don't respond to anything. They're just there like moving around. But I set up the installation and I was like, that's it. And I really thought that they were like something else to me, and they were like coming from me. And they were like these little creatures that I created, and I saw them all with my mom, and it had all this entity, and I was like, oh, I think I'm missing something, and so I created this artificial belly or something, and the gallery and the installation was just the balls, but in order to install the installation, I just came into the gallery space and I installed them, and then I let them run for the period of time that the show runs. So it's a very small gesture of me installing those robots, or they're not really robotics, they're not reactive, they're just moving. And then the other one, Becoming With, or the revised version of the Mechanical Turk, it's really coming from my frustration of wanting to make things, because I know how I want them to move. Especially when I was doing anima, I know how I want you to breathe, but you're doing like this, you know, and it's like, that's not okay. So I was like, I just should be inside that thing and make it myself. And the Mechanical Turk, if you're not familiar, it was one of these automatons that were very famous in the 18th century, at the late 19th century, sorry. It was this automata that was playing chess, and it was really famous. It traveled, toured all over the world, playing chess, and people would like think it was so smart because it always wins and everything. Well, at the end, it has a little guy inside, and it was moving the chess piece there. And so that's why I call it the revised version, because this is how it is actually. I just get inside the ball and I make all the movements and I make it reactive. And I cannot see, so I really focus on like how I can listen and how I sort of I learn the gallery space beforehand visually, and then I get there and I sort of try to improvise how I move. And I film it. I shoot a lot of video before, so I know how it looks when I do certain things inside, in order to see how it will look and how it will interact. So these are the two becomings. But right after that, which this work were the two, and they are furry balls, they're related to me, with that they established a different set of relationship, whereas the other one were this relationship. And then this point I was very focused on this moment of encounter. And in the other ones, I have this encounter between the machine and the human. Well, here, I also wanted this encounter between these creatures and myself, and my own body. A female, Hispanic body. And I started to think about this otherness these creatures were at the end, because they all have some sort of organic look. Even though the other ones were not furry, these ones were furry, they all have this animalness. And the idea of becoming, I put it there in the title, so it was more real. It could have this relationship or this attachment to the idea of animalness and becoming animal and becoming woman from the less. So after that, I sort of, if these were related to our animalness that we all have, the second set of work, performance, were certainly more related to our relationship with machines, again to machines. I create this series of two performances that are kind of hard to see. First, Designer Machine 1 and Designer Machine 2. And what I did there is I create this machine, which is a very industrial machine. And it's very repetitive, and I just create this cycle where I perform with the machine. And in the first one, Designer Machine 1, it's a cam mechanism that carries milks through the gallery space. It's a very horizontal piece. I'm gonna just put the video so you can get. So the milk is coming behind a curtain, and the milk is traveling there, and I'm just there resisting and waiting for the milk to be delivered in my dress. So I create this dress that is kind of like an architectural dress where I just wait in there for the milk. Once my dress is full of milk, I just go back and I pour it again, and then come back again and wait for the milk. It's very horizontal and machine, and it's this sewing machine one, and it's or the female reincarnation of Sisyphus. It was very much attached to this idea of absurdism, of the absurdity, and I attach it really to Sisyphus there as the hero of absurdity, as Camus will say. And it really was about that, about just waiting, about a cycle, and about making this entire machine that was so tedious to create myself, to just do nothing, or to do a very, very absurd action that will put me there. It will actually force me to be there, because I create this machine that is actually broken, that is actually not working, and in order for the milk not to like go away, I need to be there waiting for it. And that was in 2010. So later, after that piece, I created, the second design machine. That was done specifically when gallery in upstate New York, it's a very particular gallery, it's inside a barn. So it was very good for me, because I wanted to like change the horizontally of the other design machine to a more vertical machine. And the other one was made out of all wood metal. I wanted to do this one all with wood. And this one, what I'm doing is I have two really like big pockets of powdered coal, and I just pour the coal into this conveyor belt. First of all, I dig a big pit on the floor, on the ground, a really deep pit, and so I'm pouring this coal into the pit, and that's it. Like in a very repetitive action. So it seems that it's not moving, but it's honestly moving. It's just so. The space is called Salem Artworks. It's an art center in Salem, upstate New York. So they invited me to do a piece, and I was like, oh, this is the right opportunity for me, because I could dig a hole in the gallery space, and I could have the verticality that I was looking for. So pretty much what you don't see very well, but my hands are there because they're very dark because of the coal. So I'm just pouring there. Oh, it's so dark, my hand, that you cannot see it. Just want to wait so you can see the pit, the well, supposedly there's a deep hole full of coal. You cannot see it because it's too dark here. Sorry? Well, that one was like 4 hours. Yeah. It's that one particular. So here it is, the coal. It's just coming here. And that one I did it for the entire opening. Or maybe it was more than 4 hours. It was like the entire opening, and then I left all the coal there for like a month. Whereas the other one, oh, it's a shame you cannot see how, because it's powder coal. So really, when it falls, like it comes all dark. the other ones I went and performed like every 3 days a week. Like I really put as a task, because this one was far away where I'd live, so I couldn't, but the other one I did it on purpose, like I was able to perform every day. So I just got to the point where I'm just gonna present what I'm working right now. And again, these are those were these moments in between, what I call. Just these moments where I need to like get out of robotic and do something that relates to that to some extent, but it's not really that. But now I'm trying to come back to robotics, and I'm working collaboratively with an architect. His name is Gustavo Krembil, and he's also from Argentina, and so we are, he lives here though, and we are working in this installation that it's sort of, the way I see it, it's how I started to think a while ago how I could address my my identity as a South American or Latin American person, and how robotics sort of start talking about that, and how I could relate this to things that eventually they're very separated, because the main research is it's very complex research. It's not really happening down there as it is happening here. So I sort of started thinking, what are the things that I could relate to that? And then I came up with the idea, of course, it's always happened in robotics, where robotics is always related to some creationist mythologies. Somehow we always relate the idea of creating an artificial being to the creation of how we are like sort of like challenging God or evolution. And every culture has their own creationist mythologies, from the golem, and even Frankenstein is like somehow a creationist mythology. So I just recall the Popol Vuh, which is the book of the people from the Mayas, and read again and realize that they of course describe how the first human being came to inhabit, to live in this earth, and they have different attempts to until we got created, and there were like different mans, and the first one was this man made out of mud or clay, and so that's when I talked to Gustavo, and he's an architect. He teaches at our Rensselaer Latin American architecture. And that's when I decided to partner with him and see how we could create these robotic agents, a community of them, that will be made out of mud. And so we came up with this idea that this is very crucial for us. We are using not only our creationist mythologies coming from my own roots, let's say, even though the Mayans were not in South America, the Quiche still, the Popol Vuh it's very pregnant down there. It's like the only creationist mythology that we attach to. And so the other thing that also came with that, it was like the way that we will develop these robots, we're using pre-Columbian construction techniques. And so we're going to use a technique that is called quincha, and it's a technique that is sort of developed first of all like in South America, Argentina, Paraguay, and it's a construction technique that uses mud to create houses. So we're going to create these geodesic sculptural things that will move around in a very chaotic, sort of chaotic way, very slowly in space, and yeah, they're made out of mud, so eventually they're gonna like disintegrate, and we are aware of that. And that was also part of the mud men, like the man creatures that for the Popol Vuh, for the Mayans, were the first attempt for them. It was not the last one. The last one was the one made out of corn. The first attempt was the one created of mud, and they, according to them, they really didn't work out because they didn't have soul. They were also blind, and they were like crumbled. They will like just like be so dumb for them, that they will, and when rain will come, they will get disintegrated. And I thought that metaphor, it was really interesting for me to speak about. There are all these things here that are speaking about our hybrid culture and how we could integrate this high technology with this super low technology, sustainable technology that are coming from where we were born, and how we can relate it to this high technology, because this is really what is going on down there, like when you have this super hybrid mixture of things. And so these are just representations. We are in the very early stage of this, of creating and designing this installation. We were just proposing this to get grants out, and we just got some grants, so we're gonna actually start it. Before that, it was like, we are attempting to do it like kind of big, like 2 meters of diameter, sort of, so the viewers can relate like physically as well with it, and not just like a small. So I guess that's what I'm gonna end with, this work in progress. And I'm really like open for questions. Thank you.